So you want to take your PVC elbow and a full can of soda, and eventually this is going to attach to the top exactly like this. So we're going to use the full can and some sandpaper. You're just going to wrap the sandpaper around your full can of soda, and you're going to place this just as it's going to attach in the upright position, and you're just going to sand this up and down until this fits flush with the soda. So we can see that there's different spaces in there. We want all of those spaces to be gone, so this fits perfectly on. Alright, now you can stop that. Okay, so now, as you can see, this is nice and curved now, and it should fit exactly on the can, and you shouldn't see any open space. We need this to be airtight. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and make the base of our engine. You're going to take an empty can, and we actually want to cut this whole top off right around the upper rim of the can. To do this, we're going to use an X-Acto knife. You want to be very careful with these. These are very sharp. So all you're going to do is very slowly press the tip of the blade facing away from you. You don't want to come back and cut your finger off. So place the tip right around and just push forward and down. And these are really sharp. It should cut right through, and pull it back out, push in, pull it back out, push in, and you want to walk right along the side of the rim. You want to get as close to that rim as possible, but just below it. And it's okay if you go a little off. We're going to clean up the edges later. And when you get close to the end, if you want to, so you don't crinkle the can too much, you can take a scissors and just cut off the remaining piece. Okay, next we still have really rough edges here from the X-Acto knife, so we want to smooth those out. We're going to take a scissors and just cut very shallow all the way around the rim. I found the best way to do this is to kind of reverse your hand away from the can, and then just really small cuts, and just slowly, just kind of like we did with the X-Acto knife, cut all the way around the rim of the can. And you want it to be as flat as possible. If it's not perfect, that's okay. There we go. And you can see much smoother. If you have a few little pieces, you can always go back and just trim those off. And there we go. It should look like this. Alright, so go ahead and take, after your PVC elbow is done, go ahead and take that and some double-sided tape. And what we're going to do with this double-sided tape is we're going to seal the curved end that you had just sanded off. We're just going to cut a piece and make sure it fits. If your tape is not thick enough to cover the whole one, just use two different pieces. That's what I'm going to do here. It does not need to be big, just enough, again, just enough to cover the end here. Okay, so I went ahead and cut two pieces just to be safe, and you're just going to press this on, and it's going to curve it. You want it to be flush right on the curved side of that PVC elbow. So just go ahead and press that on. Make sure it's sealed right around the rim. Again, I use two pieces because I want to make sure it's completely sealed all the way around with enough space. So I'm go ahead and put that top part on and make sure it's on there nice and firm. Just like that. Go ahead and on mine, I just have a little excess over here, and it's not so important, but I'm just going to cut off the top, not right next to the pipe, but just leaving a little bit less so I have a little bit more room to work with. Be careful, this tape's super sticky, so just make sure it stays stuck, just so that doesn't get in the way later. Next, we want to open this hole up where the PVC pipe was. So I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, and be careful on this as well. This is really sticky, so you might have to go slower, but you're going to just make a hole inside, and you're going to cut around inside just like this, but on the tape side. Cut all the way around. Make sure that this tape has a nice hole to allow air to pass through. Again, be careful. Make sure you're not ripping the tape off. If the tape goes inside, that's okay. And there we go. That's good enough. That's going to allow air to pass through here, which is what we want. Okay, so once you've got that on, we want to now peel off the top layer to make this double-sided tape double-sided. This can be a bit tricky. You just gotta keep going at it till you get it. Sometimes you could use the knife to help you out. I'm going to see what I can do here, but we're basically wanting to peel. There we go. Now we've got our PVC. Now be careful, don't set this down. You don't want it picking up other things. We want this to be really sticky. So from there, go ahead and grab the empty can that you already have cut out. And in addition to that, grab a full soda can. Now, hopefully, if the soda can that you have is the same type as the one you had before, it should fit snugly right into the top, or at least the same brand. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use our PVC elbow, and we're going to attach it to that bottom can and use that full can as a support that we can press up against. So what you want to do is make sure that the top of that PVC curve is around the spot where the bottom of the top can would be. So near the top, not all the way up to it, but just imagine that curve lining up with the bottom of the top can that you can't see from there. So go ahead and just press that against it. Make sure the double-sided tape all around is flat, so you can just press that on and try to do it and without making any dents or wrinkles, and that should lie perfectly flush since we already sanded that earlier, and it should look like this when you're done. Now, well, notice inside we'd have no airflow here, so you want to take your X-Acto knife again, and we're going to cut a hole where that PVC pipe is from the inside. So go ahead and start right in the middle somewhere, and just go ahead and, just like we did before, just press, get a different angle here, press your X-Acto knife right in. It might take a little bit of pressure, but it'll go through. And then again, you're just going to work yourself all the way around. Use that edge of the PVC pipe as a guide. You don't want to go outside of that. As you're working inside here, it's okay if this is jagged. We're not going to be really messing with this that much. But what is important is we don't want jagged edges sticking this way. Our cylinder is going to be in this chamber going up and down. We don't want it catching on this. So I'm going to put the cap back on my X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to use the back of it to press inside, press these sharp edges inside the direction of the PVC. So it's not going to catch on my displacer once we have that working. That'll be important for later. This can be somewhere where the engine does not work if that displacer catches. So I'm making sure all those edges point in, and if I feel my finger in here, it shouldn't be sharp. So be careful when you're doing that, but if you feel any parts that are somewhat sharp, just press those inside until you have a fairly smooth opening right there to your PVC. Okay, so now go ahead and grab your second can. This one should have no cuts on it, and what we're going to do is actually just take off this top. So you're going to need a can opener. Be careful as you're doing this. Can openers can be a little tricky, but we really don't want to damage this too much. So just it actually works better if someone can hold the can while you work on it, but I'm going to do my best here. Hopefully getting a nice smooth cut as you go. As you get to the end, it might, oh, perfect. So if it doesn't, you can use little scissors to help you get it off. That worked perfectly. We'll just want to take that out, and this is going to be our top part of the engine with just this top missing. All right, so after we've got the top off here, we want to make the holes for our crankshaft. So what we're going to do is you're going to take a thumbtack, and you want to make it pretty even on both sides. So you can kind of eyeball it. I kind of always look for the top, and I kind of put my fingers where they're going to go. You want it just a little bit lower than the rim, not too low. Just maybe, you know, quarter inch, half an inch, whatever. And you're just going to poke your thumbtack. Go ahead and, again, you don't want to dent it. So you can kind of do a little twist, and eventually it'll go through just like that. And you can wiggle this around. Make sure that's fairly big. We might need to open it up, make it a little bit bigger later, which is okay. But just to get us a starting point, thumbtack right there. And then we want to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. You can, again, just eyeball it. Try to do this about the same distance from the rim and about directly across. If it's a little off, that's okay too. Go ahead and do the same thing here. Just apply pressure a little bit at a time and it'll go through. Again, you can wiggle it around a little bit to make that hole just a bit bigger. And then you should have two small holes directly across from each other. That's where our crankshaft is going to go. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and make the crankshaft. So go ahead and take your thicker wire. I'm using 18 gauge. If it's somewhere around there, that's okay. And give yourself about a foot. A little more is okay. It's always better to have excess and cut the rest off later. Go ahead and use a wire cutter and cut the piece that you're going to be working with. Now for your crankshaft, go ahead and make sure this is, now it might be a little bent coming off the roll, but make sure this is straight as possible. And go ahead and start on one end, kind of in the middle, and then a little closer to one end. And this is where we're going to use our pliers. And go ahead and just grab hold of it in whatever spot, it's okay. Grab hold of it, and you're just going to go ahead and make about a 90-degree bend. So just go ahead and, against the pliers, use the pliers as leverage, and go ahead and bend it up. If it's not quite 90 degrees, that's okay. That might even be a little preferable, but just use it to bend up a little bit like that. Now we're going to go ahead and take where we just bent, go ahead and grab that, and we want to create another bend going back in the same direction that we initially started. So depending on the thickness of your pliers, again, this doesn't matter so much, but just kind of eyeball it. I'm using about the thickness, a little bit less of my pliers to give me my bend length. Go ahead and you just want to grab on to where that is, and then you're going to bend it right back in the same direction that you started with. And then we're going to bend again from there. Grab where you just bended. This time go a little bit further. So if this is maybe a 1/3 inch, 1/2 inch, we can go ahead and make this, and I'll show you on the can here. This is actually going to sit inside this can, and this is going to be rotating. So you can kind of gauge it from there. I'm going to go ahead and go just a little bit bigger, but not too much thicker than my pliers. And I'm going to bend back up, again using the pliers as leverage so I can get a nice clean bend. This crankshaft has to be done pretty well. If it's not very smooth, it can cause some issues. And make that kind of in the same angle that you had your last one. Almost a right angle, but bending a little bit outward. And now we want to bend back again, just like we did before. This should be the same length as the one you had on the other side, bending back in the original direction that you started. So after you finish that part, you have just kind of a little U shape, and this is going to eventually spin right inside, just like that. Okay? From there, what we're going to actually do is we're going to be creating a second bend. So if you can imagine this on the inside, you can go further out. We're going to make another bend outside of the can here. So wherever what you just bent, line that up kind of in the middle of your can, and you're going to make your next bend just outside of this, the thickest part of the can right here. So you're going to bend it somewhere around here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we do want this part sticking outside of the can when we stick it inside the holes. Now this bend, we're not going to do this in the same direction. This bend is actually going to go perpendicular. So if we have our U shape here, this is going to go away from you. If this is facing you, so if you have it over like this, the bend is going to come this way. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing on, and I'm going to go ahead and turn so you can see kind of from my perspective. We're going to go ahead and use the pliers again. Make sure we've got a good spot outside of the can to give ourselves enough room. And then this bend is going to be perpendicular away from, so it should be forming a 90-degree angles with your other bend. Now this one, we don't want to be straight perpendicular. We're going to put this probably at like a 45-degree angle, so about halfway
is fine. You can see it's not going straight up, but it's angled out a little bit. And you really don't need this bend to be that far away. You're just going to go a little bit further. So not even a length of the pliers, maybe half the length of what I've got here. And then you're going to bend it back in the same direction that we started. So let me grab on here. And this time I'm not using the pliers as a lever, but I'm going to bend it at the pliers because I don't want it that far off. So here I'm going to grab hold and I'm going to actually bend using the pliers in that direction right there. And we can always make, the wire's pretty flexible, so we can always make some adjustments further if we need to do that. In general, it should look about like this. So you've got your kind of your 90, almost 90 degree bends here, and then as you go, as you spin this, you can see this smaller bend outside of the can going at a 45 degree angle. If it's a little off, that's okay, and then back in the same direction.
So now go ahead and take your crankshaft and that can that you had used the thumbtack to poke holes through and insert this side with the extra bend, which is actually going to be our long side, but you've got that extra bend that we did. Go ahead and put that to the right. Make sure whatever you want the front of your engine to be, face that side, and you're just going to put that right into the hole. If your hole is big enough, it should slide right in, and go ahead and press that all the way until it can't go any further. Now we actually want this side to get into the other hole, so this is where you're going to have to take your wire cutters here and cut off any excess. Now just to be safe, go a little bit, just enough you want to cut it so you can get it inside the can. So make sure this is all the way to the right side as far as that can go. Then take your wire cutters, go ahead and cut that piece of wire off. See if you can get that in there. If you can't, just go ahead and take it out a little bit more. That's okay. Just keep cutting it off a little bit at a time till you are able to get it inside. There we go. And then go ahead and put it right into that other hole that you had drilled from there. So now, if you want to, do leave some excess, but you don't need nearly this much. So if you just want to cut, I'm going to cut it about right here. I might even cut some more later. But just so it's a little easier to work with, cut that off. And now you've got your crankshaft in position, and it's going to rotate just like this when your engine's hopefully working. All right, go ahead and take your crankshaft out of the can. And what we're going to be doing is cutting out a hole in the front. This hole is basically just to allow us to get our fingers in there and do some work. So make sure the two holes are in the side, and you want to cut a hole basically right in the middle of the can. You can always adjust the size later. Aesthetically, smaller is better, but it really doesn't matter. Just enough space to get your fingers in there. So go ahead and start with your X-Acto knife like we've done before. I just put it right in the middle of the area. Again, be careful, we don't want to crinkle the cans too much. And then just work your way around. Once you get to here, this is probably about low enough, about 1/3 up from the bottom. Then you're going to go ahead and just cut. There's really no nice way to do this, just whatever it takes. Go ahead and start giving yourself a nice sized hole right here in the front. Okay, now you can kind of get your fingers in there. Again, you can always make adjustments later. I'm going to make mine a little bigger. And you might want to go around, cut off those jagged edges if there are any, just so you don't hurt yourself when you're working in it. Again, you're going to want to put your hands in here a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there right now. I might make it a little bigger depending on how well I do, but I think that's going to be okay for now. Last thing to this top part is we're going to put a very small hole here that we're going to eventually put our fishing line or string through. So I have fishing line here. I'm going to cut a piece. Again, we can make this shorter later, so I'm just going to give myself plenty of room. And we want this line or string to fit just barely through the hole we're going to make. This is extremely important. Don't make this hole too big or it's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the thumbtack and I'm going to go right into the center. I'm going to approximate as best I can, right in the center of the can. And I'm not going to push full force. I'm really going to go very slowly, just a little pressure, and increase as you go. But you really want to control this. You want to make sure that this hole does not get too big. And if you look closely at thumbtacks, the point, it's not the same thickness throughout. This sharp end, and it slowly gets thicker. So we just want to barely puncture it enough for that line to fit through. If it's too tight, we can always make it bigger, but you can't make it smaller. So again, approximate the center, and then just very low pressure. You're going to have to push a bit hard. If you go at a little bit of an angle, that might help. You don't want to make it too big. So you can see I didn't really feel it go all the way through, but I have a very small hole. Not sure if you can see that. I'm going to go ahead and test it with my string. See how my size is. Hopefully I didn't go too big, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty good size. It looks like that barely fits in there. So it looks like we're good. Again, the smaller is the better. If this is tight, you do want this to go pretty smoothly in and out of the hole. You can make it a little bigger, but again, be very careful with that part. First, let's go ahead and take our thinner wire. I'm just using 24 gauge, and give yourself, again, about a foot. This is going to be extra, but we'll cut off anything that's left later. So a foot and a little bit is going to be perfectly fine. And then go ahead and grab your steel wool. Now the displacer is super important. We want it to strike the right balance. It has to be kind of the right size. The great thing about steel wool, this is a great insulator, but it's also very flexible, and we can make adjustments as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just unwrap mine. Our displacer, we want to be about a third the size of a soda can. So this right now is about the same height. I'm going to go ahead and just cut this in half. We could smash it together, but it just makes it a little easier to work with if you cut the steel wool strips in half. So doing that, use either a pair of scissors you don't really care about or some tin snips. Go slow. This could really mess up scissors, but I'm just going to kind of crank through here. Alright, so go ahead and pull that apart, and it's okay if it's a little messy. It happens. It's just how steel wool works. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to roll this up into kind of a cylinder. And again, we can clean it up and make some adjustments as we go. But first, we're going to take that piece of wire that we're going to cut, and we're going to put that right in the middle, because it just makes it easier to have this already poking through. And we're going to roll right around this. Now, as you're rolling, you want to make it fairly tight. You don't want too much open spaces in here, or else heat's not going to be insulated towards the bottom of the can. So as you roll, and go ahead and bunch it up. We don't want it spread out too much, so it can be bunched up. Roll it right around the wire, and you want to do it pretty tightly. Now you don't have to make it so tight that it turns into a solid rock, but you just want to make sure it's tight enough so that air is not seeping through it, and still allows you for some adjustment. So you can see it's still pretty flexible, but fairly tight. It shouldn't be too loose. Alright, good. Now you can see this is not nearly the size that we want. We need this to fit basically on the inside of one of these cans here. But size-wise, we're at about half a can. So we want to make sure we keep this condensed to about a third of the can size. That's going to give us enough room for it to move up and down. So as you go, remember to just keep pressing inward. I'm going to go ahead and take some extra steel wool pieces and continue rolling. So I got myself another strip here, and you're just going to continue right where you left off. This stuff does a really good job of attaching to where it previously was. It'll just hook in there and then stick right there. So just go ahead and rub it right on where you left off. Lay it out, and then you can go ahead and continue the rolling process. Alright, so once we got the size, and you can check your open can if you want, it needs to fit inside there pretty snugly with a little bit of room on the edges. Then you can go ahead and just smooth this out. We don't want all these frays, so just use your fingers. Careful, try not to get splinters.
Alright, and after you're done, if you want to trim off kind of some of these edges, make it a little bit more smooth, you can do that. We don't want anything snagging. Okay, then when you finish, you should have a nice, fairly smooth cylinder, about a third the size of your soda can. If it's not quite a third, you can always smash it and adjust it a little bit later. Again, the stuff sticks pretty well. And there you go. And a great way to clean up the little filaments that get everywhere is just use a magnet. It'll pick it right up, and then you just kind of sweep it over your workspace, and then take it over to a trash can and throw all that away. Displacer, we should have this wire sticking out kind of in the middle. Whatever side looks like it's more in the middle, go ahead and leave that to the top. Take the bottom. If it's too long, you can use your wire cutters to cut a little bit off of it. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this around, and it's going to create kind of like a little hook. So all you got to do is twist this around the bottom, and it should hold itself up just like this. So just wrap it around, and it should be able to kind of float up with you holding the top without falling. Next, what we're going to do is on the top, we're going to create a little hook here, and we want that hook to actually be very close to here. So we've got way too much extra wire here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this just a little bit for now, and then I'll probably end up cutting a little bit more later. But what we want to do is we want to twist right here towards the bottom, and we're going to make a little bit of a hook, but we want to keep that very close. We don't want that too tall. We want that kind of sitting on the inside. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut. I kind of gauge how much space I need. I'm going to cut the excess wire once again. Now I'm going to go ahead and fold this down over the top and kind of shove that right in there. You can twist it around if you're afraid it's not going to be too secure, but this wire does a pretty good job of holding this weight, and then kind of press that in so it's just sticking up just a little bit. You don't want this sticking way out here. You can see it's just barely right above the top. Okay, now go ahead and take your crankshaft, and we're going to take another piece of that thin wire. Just give yourself, 6 inches, 7 inches. It's going to be plenty to work with. And we're going to be connecting this to that U shape in the crankshaft. So having that out, go ahead and wrap that, and you want that to be fairly tight. I kind of just hook it and then take one end and you wrap around. Go ahead and just do a few times. You don't want it too tight, but you want it fairly tight. It's going to need to rotate. So I'm just going to do a couple of wraps, and then I'm going to go ahead and twist that on the bottom so that stays together, and it should flow. It should go pretty smoothly. It shouldn't be too tight. It might be able to slide side to side a little bit, and that's okay, but we do want it to be able to rotate through. Alright, now from there we're actually going to make kind of an interesting little shape here. This allows us some room for adjustments, which comes in handy a little bit later. If you have excess down here sticking out, which I kind of do have a little bit, you can go ahead and cut that off. It's okay if we have some excess, but we don't want too much getting in the way. Let's go ahead and tighten that up so those are nice and close together. Now again, we're going to go ahead and make this shape here. We're going to bend it out, and then we're going to kind of do a quick bend back in. So you make this little kind of loop shape right here, and this is going to let us make any adjustments if we need to. Then on the bottom of that, we're going to go ahead and make another hook. So we're going to go ahead and bend this around here, and then go ahead and wrap it around, and you can even just take this and twist it if you want. That'll work to give yourself a nice hook. And then we're going to take all that excess, take your wire cutters and cut off whatever we don't need. And there we go. Now we have our little connecting rod. This is going to connect to the displacer. And we give this little bend right here because if we need to make adjustments, we can easily just bend this height-wise. Now go ahead and take your top soda can, the top part of the engine. Let's put our crankshaft back in. Find the hole here. Put that back in. There we go, and you should have your hook right there on the inside. Now what we're going to do is, this is why we had our hand hole, we're going to take our piece of fishing line that we used before, and we're going to go ahead and put this in the bottom hole that we had made earlier with the thumbtack. So we're going to place that right in there, and that's going to come through here. Hopefully you can see the fishing line. And you're just going to pull that through. And what we want to do, and this can be a little tricky, and this was why we made the hand hole, is we want to attach, get that fixed in there. Again, if you have someone help you, it could be a little easier, but I'll manage. We want to tie this string to the hook that we made in that connecting rod. Okay, so I'm just going to loop that through here, and I'm just going to go ahead and, just like you kind of start tying your shoes, that'll work well enough. Go ahead and tie a knot right there. So I'm just going to cross over, loop through. Okay, and you're going to want to do this a couple times to make sure it's nice and tight. We definitely don't want this coming off. So I'm going to do one more. If you have any excess, go ahead and just cut that extra string off. But again, now you should have the connecting rod connected to the string, which is going to go through that hole right on the bottom that we made earlier.
Okay, so now you're going to go and take the displacer that you had made earlier, and remember that little hook that we made on the inside, we're going to tie this string to that hook. So I'm going to go ahead and just loop that through the inside. And now we want to tie it there. Now the height of this is kind of important. Eventually we want this, in comparison to here, we want that a little bit off of the bottom. We can always, again, make adjustments there, so it's always better to go on the shorter side. I'm going to go ahead and tie it off about right here, a few finger lengths, just a couple inches, and we always can make adjustments here. This is one of the things that often you need to adjust on the end is displacer height. So as you're kind of tightening, make sure that it tightens on the side that's going to go up towards the top of the can. So as you're tightening, pull it up, adjust it as you go, and then we'll go ahead and put it about right there. Should be decent. Then I'm going to go ahead and tie off one more knot here just to make sure it holds. Okay, and then again we can just cut off our excess string here. Okay, so now you should have about something that looks like this.
Now this is going to sit inside of your bottom can. Now looking at the displacer height, you want a little bit of air between the bottom of this displacer and between this can. So it looks like my displacer is a bit low. And if I look inside the top here, it looks like this actually unbent a little bit. And now this thin wire in here, this is what we can use to make our adjustments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach my hand in there, and I'm going to re-pinch it a little bit, which will slightly raise the displacer. Now when this sits in here, you can see there's going to be a little bit of airspace right on the bottom, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to pinch it just a little bit more to make it a little bit tighter. And this is, again, one of the spots that we often will make adjustments to our project. Now from here, you want to smooth out your displacer. Whatever you need to do, if you need to make any adjustments or anything like that to make this really smooth. And this is going to go inside of your bottom can. And this top can is just going to press right into there. Now be careful when you press it, but it should fit nicely right inside, just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and fix my crankshaft up here. I'm going to fix my connecting rod. And you should have something that looks just about like this. With the displacer, hopefully there's just a little bit of air underneath the displacer, and that hopefully this can move up and down like so if you crank the right side of the engine, just like this. Okay, go ahead and get your balloon, your screw, your nut, and your 2 washers. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your balloon, and we're actually going to cut the top off of it. Okay, so you can go maybe a little more than halfway through the balloon and go ahead and just cut straight across. All right, if it's not perfect, that's okay. Doesn't make a big difference. This is actually going to be going on top of our PVC pipe. After you've cut the top of the balloon off there, and it doesn't have to be pretty, go ahead and take your screw, put 1 washer on, and then you're going to press this screw up right through the center. You want it pretty much right on the top of where the top of the balloon would be. If it's not perfect, that's okay, but it's just going to make things a little bit smoother, so you can kind of play with it, find that top piece. And now what you can do is we want this to press through. An easy way to do this is press through so you can see the imprint of the screw below. Then take your X-Acto knife and go ahead and just cut a little hole in the top of the balloon there, and then push through. If the hole's not big enough, again, just take your X-Acto knife, make a little cut there, and just keep kind of going until that squeezes through. You don't want to rip the balloon too much. Oh, I can see it coming. You don't want to rip the balloon too much, so be careful. Just do a little bit at a time, and then you'll see that the screw will slowly start finding its way through. Be careful with the knife. And then after your screw's through, take your other washer, put that right on top, and then your nut, and you're going to go ahead and just screw this right on. You might need to hold on to the bottom as you tighten it up. You can go ahead and hand tighten it for a bit. After you've hand tightened that about as much as you can go ahead and take your pliers, go ahead and get a little grip on top, and then your Phillips head or flathead, whatever screw you have, and then go ahead and just tighten it the rest of the way. It doesn't have to be ridiculously tight, but go ahead and just until it's fairly tight. There we go. And then you're going to have your nice little screw through your balloon, and we're going to be able to attach a wire to that later, so it should look something like that. All right, go ahead and take that scrap piece of balloon that you had, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut off the little thicker rubber end right here, and we're going to be using that to help secure our top part to the PVC pipe. So this doesn't need to be beautiful. Again, we're just going to use this as kind of a seal. So go ahead and take your engine piece. I'm going to use my string spool to give me support here. And the top part with the screw, that's going to be placed right on top, just like so, with that screw right in the middle. And you're going to take your the bottom part, the little seal that we cut off, and you're going to try to wrap that around here, and you're going to put that right on the edge. And you want this to just have enough space to go up and down, just like this. Now this actually has to be airtight, so you might want to go through and try to smooth out some of these bottom ridges. If any air is coming through here, it's going to make your engine less likely to function and or function less efficiently. Okay. Now, one thing I found that helps is if we take a smaller piece of wire, your thin wire will do just fine. I'm just going to cut a little piece here. And we can actually wrap this around as kind of an extra seal, just right underneath the rubber seal from the bottom of the balloon. So go ahead and make that close if you choose to do this. And then you're going to wrap it directly around. This is just going to make it a little bit extra tight. You cross these over. And then all you need to do is twist from there. And if you grab it really close and keep twisting, it'll start tightening. More and more, just keep on twisting until it's really tight in there. There we go, that's pretty good. And hopefully between the seal and the wire twisting, we don't have any air leaking from the bottom. So then, if you've chosen to do that, go ahead and cut off your excess wire there. We don't need extra wire sticking out. Okay, it's starting to look like an engine. You should have something that looks about like this at this point with this balloon airtight, able to go up and down like so. What we want to do is grab another piece of your thin wire. This just needs to be long enough. We're going to be connecting this screw up to our crankshaft up here. So this is going to give me plenty of length right here. I just took about a foot. I'll cut off the extra later. And first thing we want to do is we want to wrap this around our screw that's coming out of the balloon here. So to do that, easiest way is probably even if you set it down or have somebody hold it, and go ahead and after you get one twist on it, you can hold it in place and then just go ahead and wrap the long end. Wrap the long end around maybe 3 times, 2 or 3 times. Make sure it's on there nice and secure, and then we want it to be pointing straight up from there, so it should be able to hold on to it just like that. From there, we want to go ahead and straighten this out, and then we're going to be wrapping it around our crankshaft. Now it's important, let me put my crankshaft back through. It's important that you put this in the right spot. We need it to be wrapped past that bend that we had made before. So if you can try, we want to make this the screw about middle depth as far as going up and down. Put that about right in the middle with the wire fairly straight, and then you're going to just be wrapping this. You can kind of pinch it to help yourself out a little bit, and then once you've got your first bend, you can do the same thing that we did before. Just go ahead and grab onto it, and then grab the long wire and wrap it around 2 or 3 times. Don't do it too tight. It really needs to be loose because it needs to be able to push and pull as the engine rotates around. So, let me get that back in there. After you have that in there, now one thing is I see that this, as we pull up here, this is too tight. We don't want too much tension because as this rotates, you can see this balloon is stretching quite a bit. So I did this too tight. I'm going to try to rewrap this and create a better distance. This is going to create too much friction. We don't want this extra tension here. I went ahead and I undid that and I redid it, and now this time you can see as the engine rotates, the balloon is not pulling so tight. It's loose and it has a lot of flexibility. I don't feel so much tension as this rotates, and that's exactly what we want for this. Alright, so I cut the excess off there, and the next thing I'm going to do is you'll notice that this kind of slides back and forth. We don't want this sliding over back towards the engine. So what I did is I'm taking a very small piece of my double-sided tape. Any tape will really work, but double-sided is really strong. And I'm going to wrap that right around close to the edge of the bend here. Just enough to stop it, so now when this slides back, it's not going to slide back too close towards the can. That's going to serve as a little stopper.
Okay, last thing we need to do, we're almost done, we need to make our flywheel. So go ahead and grab your CD, your bottle cap. I have a little piece of double-sided tape, you'll see why, and your thumbtack. So first thing we want to do, go ahead and grab your bottle cap, and we're going to try to poke a hole, a decent-sized hole right through the center of there. Now these are a little tough, so you might have to put some good pressure there. And once it's through, go ahead and try to spin it around. We want that to be somewhat loose. There we go. That should be fine. And what we're going to do now is we're going to attach this bottle cap to the back of our CD like so. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take some small pieces of the double-sided tape and I'm going to cut just little strips like this, and I'm going to go ahead and attach those kind of around the outside of the bottle cap. And they don't have to be triangular, rectangular might be a little better, but we just want these to be kind of surrounding that hole on each side without going over the hole. So I'm going to get one more piece. I'm going to cut the end off of this one because I'm not a big fan of that right there, okay? And lastly, I'm going to cut one more little rectangular piece. And here we go, and that's going to go right on in that spot right there. So this should be, and I don't want to cover my hole there, so I'm going to remove that. This should be pretty much covering along the outside of that. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the extra pieces here.
All right, after you've got those ready to stick, go ahead and take it to the CD and line that hole right up to the center. And you're just going to press that right on there and squeeze it in, make sure it's nice and stuck, and that's not going anywhere. Last piece, just a small rectangle of double-sided tape once again. And this time you might want to go ahead and
Take that off in the beginning before you put it onto anything. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually put this in any spot, it doesn't matter where, but just go ahead and shove it in onto the bottle cap. Try to get it off of your finger. We don't want it to stick to your finger. We want it to stick to the bottle cap. And then once you get that inside there, give me a second. Okay, you might want to use a little tool. You can use your scissors if you want to keep it off. There we go. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to take your engine that you've got, and you're going to put the other side that we haven't done anything with of your crankshaft through that hole that we've created inside this CD. So you're going to just shove the other end of the crankshaft through there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bending the end. Now if you have too much, make sure this is all lined up in the middle, and go ahead and gauge how much space you have. It should be about right. You might need to cut out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and probably just cut off just a teeny tiny bit here to give me a little bit less that I'm going to have to work with. Okay. Try to not destroy the engine. There we go. All right, now what we're going to do is we are going to bend this end of the wire at a 90-degree angle. So this wire here, go ahead and just grab it from the side, and however you can do it is fine. It can bend in any angle, doesn't matter. But you're going to go ahead and grab the very end with your pliers, and you're just going to make a 90-degree bend as best as you can, just like that. Now this bend is going to be pressed right into the double-sided tape that we stuck in there. Okay, so go ahead and take that, press it right in so it should be attached, just like that. Now what we want to do is go ahead and grab one last piece of tape. You don't need to rip off the opposite side. And this is just going to go right on top of that piece to make sure it's very nicely sealed. We don't want that moving anywhere. So I'm going to press that. I'm going to put some pressure, make sure it's really on there. We don't want that going anywhere. All right.
All right, and we're pretty much done. Now we might need to make a few adjustments as we test it, but it should pretty much look like this. As you turn this wheel right here, it should be fairly smooth. If it's really hard and it doesn't rotate a couple times, at least 3, 4, 5 times pretty smoothly, it's definitely not going to work. We want as little friction as possible. So we're ready to test it out.
All right, so the first attempt actually didn't work, and that's very common as these things have lots of details that are important. So a couple things that I changed, if you look closely. One is this this connector connecting the diaphragm to the crankshaft. That was sliding off the end, so I added a piece of double-sided tape just to keep that in between here. Another thing, which was probably a very common error that people make, is my displacer was too small inside there. So what I did is I added another layer around the displacer, and I compacted it, just squeezing around, squeezing the top, so it fit a little bit more snugly. This displacer is supposed to insulate the heat, keeping the heat towards the bottom of the can. So if this is not big enough, it's going to cause big issues. So those are a couple things you could try if you're running into issues for your first attempt.